Real quick, before we start this podcast episode, I just want to say thank you for tuning into the Marc Colcer podcast. I know you've got a million things that you could be doing right now, and the fact that you're taking time out of your day to watch this podcast episode truly means the world to me, and I just want to say thank you for that. If you'd like to continue to support the podcast, right below this video, if you could hit the subscribe button, and then, hey, if you got some more time and you want to hit the download button, the comment button, the like button, the share button, any of those buttons, it's greatly, greatly appreciated. It helps for other people to find out about the podcast, and it helps for you to be notified about future episodes. So if you guys could take a quick second, hit the subscribe button, I would really appreciate that. Outside of that, this episode and every other episode is brought to you guys by Roast Umber Coffee. As some of you guys know, I co-founded Roast Umber Coffee, and we have the greatest farmers in Guatemala and Honduras and the greatest roaster in Grand Rapids, Michigan, all to bring you guys the greatest cup of coffee possible. So if you'd like to try it out, go to our website, use the coupon code MARC30, and you're going to get 30% off your coffee. Now on to the episode. Thank you guys again for tuning in. Welcome to the Marc Colcer podcast. All right, man, so we got to start this podcast with, I need you to help me out with the proper pronunciation because I don't know if is it BVDCats, is it BVDCats, is it, actually, I said this into a space once to Michael Lee, XRP. I said, is it BVDCats? So can you clarify for everybody, how do you pronounce it?
Yeah, I love Michael Lee. Shout out to that guy, big supporter. And, you know, it's the funny thing is people can take it any way they want. Usually we go by Bad Cat. That's what we brand and push out as far as the pronunciation. But people have really taken and spread the message in whatever way they want. You know, our core motto is be very different, create aligning thoughts, which is where the V comes from. So people can say BVD and it perfectly represents the brand the way we intended it. But most people just say Bad Cat because it flows better.
It definitely flows better. So, all right, man. So let's jump into things. Can you tell everyone a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, my name is NFTHellBoy. I'm the founder of Bad Cat, one of the 4 core founders that derugged the project, and I handle the day-to-day operations. I'm the CEO and business strategy for the project and all the subsidiaries we have.
There we go. There we go. So, all right. So now before we jump into things, I do want to tell everybody about the Hey Wallet giveaway that we have going on. So for anybody who's watching this podcast, and I strongly encourage people to do this because I don't feel like enough people do it. Take a listen to the podcast, come up with a cool thread of everything we're about to talk about. Post that on Twitter. Basically, what we want people to do is to help, share the podcast, bring more eyes and attention to it. So anything you guys are doing, we're going to be paying attention. And if somebody comes up with anything really, really cool that really benefits the podcast, we're going to be sending you guys Solana through Hey Wallet. So make sure you guys are tagging us. Make sure you guys are sharing the podcast. Make sure you guys are creating cool threads and things like that. And we're going to be sending people Solana. Obviously, we don't have unlimited funds, but if you're doing something cool, we're going to be noticing that, and we're going to be sending people Solana through Hey Wallet. So definitely make sure you guys are taking advantage of that. But now to get further into things, so can you tell everyone a little bit more about yourself personally, kind of before getting into NFTs? What were you doing with your life and just your background in general?
Yeah, as far as work goes, I was making, web content. I was esports management. I usually managed esports organization teams, team structures, their day-to-day, and kind of their workout routines, making sure they're in optimal condition to do things and play things. And before that, just making music, being in the kind of like the system structure of esports. I spent about, 8-9 years after education, kind of like as soon as I started going to college, playing collegiate stuff and taking that esports route and taking it further in terms of going from being a player into management, going from management to kind of like operations, and then finding myself in the Web3 space about, if you count my time in ETH, which is like not connected to Twitter and, the community and the vibes, I was pretty much just a GameFi maxi who liked to invest there, just doing that for a while. And then eventually, like, I want to say about almost a year ago, switching to Solana, getting integrated and just diving deep into this whole thing, getting obsessed with it. And, now I'm here.
Do you remember kind of what brought you into NFTs in general? I mean, obviously the gaming side of things, but then getting into Solana NFTs and whatnot. Do you remember, like, what was your first project that you got into?
Yeah, Solana NFTs actually were like the catalyst for me to really take NFTs and be like, man, I love this. And it's a great story now. Like, it would be a totally worse story if Jelly Esports wasn't as great as they are. I was watching Carlos OMFG's stream, and back then he didn't run any projects. He just he was a Rollbit casino streamer.
Really? I didn't know any of that.
Yeah, he streamed on Twitch, and I would watch his content because, casino meta was a thing. I saw this guy. I was like, okay, I'll check him out. And he had these Jelly Babies NFTs he was really pushing. He loved them. They were these, a little ugly but super cute, really basic art. I saw that it was a Solana NFT. I was like, okay, I'll buy this coin. Don't know what it does. Don't know what it is. Dived into it, aped into Jelly Babies until I was like the second biggest holder under Carlos. And that was kind of my onboarding moment, you know, to see him derug that later and turn it into what it is kind of like historic for me, because that's my first project ever getting into. But yeah, just taking that deep dive into seeing what Web3 and NFTs could really offer on Solana, where the communities are so much more integrated.
That might be the first success story from somebody who bought some shit after listening to somebody on Twitch. That literally might be the only success story in the history of Twitch of somebody, you know, hearing somebody being like, hey, you should go and buy this, you should do this, and then it ends up in actual success. That's really cool. I actually didn't know that Carlos had that background. How many people were watching his live streams back then?
I want to say like, you probably know better. It's a long time. I want to say 50 to 80 people.
Oh, that's a consistent amount of people.
I remember he kept doing it until he had like one day he lost a lot of money on Rollbit. And he was like, I'm done casino streaming. I'm done with this, you know. But to see him where he is now and everything he's doing is really crazy.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And obviously same thing with you. So okay, so let's talk about that. So so for people who don't know, BVDCats originated as DeadCets, right? Was the original project, and then that project rugged, and you guys essentially started the derug of that project. Yeah. So can you explain a little bit more of that background in terms of kind of what went on with DeadCets, and then how you guys became part of the derug and all of that sort of thing?
Yeah, so for the people who don't know, the main founder who derugged the project initially, Less Vision NFT on Twitter, Lunar Rivers, he took over the project pretty much the day it rugged. I think DeadCets minted on April 20th for like 0.05 Sol, something around there. And then immediately the guy rugged with the funds from the treasury. Lunar at the time was a lore writer on the project. He was just really invested in the community. And he basically got on there the first day and told the guy, like, hey, I've seen you rug I've seen projects get rugged before. I know how this goes. You're saying, oh, blah, 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 I'm going to be there and this and that. But I know you're just trying to rug, you know, do the right thing and just at least give me access to the art, because you have a real community and you have something to do here. And, you know, the guy ghosted him for 4 hours. He sent a message just being like, all right, that's it. But just know, like, you ruined something here, basically. And the guy came back and was like, okay, here's the authority, here's everything. I'm taking the mint funds, but, you know, if you want to work on the project, you can. And so, like, immediately the next day, Lunar got into a call with Spoonicus and just told him, hey, man, just give me 5 minutes. If you don't like what I have to say, if you don't like what I'm bringing to you, you never have to see me again. And in that 5 minutes, he convinced Spoonicus to advise the project for free and to bring on a staff. And so what he did was he took people he knew that had experience in some aspects, or you know, that he knew wanted to work on the project, good people, and he brought them onto the DeadCets team. And I was a holder of DeadCets at the time, so I wanted to get involved. And pretty much from that point on the 21st onward, we went forward with like a 12-man team to try to derug the project. And over the next months, you know, that would slim down, but ultimately that's how it got started.
You know what I'm sitting here wondering this entire time? I'm like, how come all the rugs that I bought into, nobody derugged that and had success with it? I'm like, God damn, like I was, you know, I've told the story before, but when I first got into NFTs and got into Solana NFTs, there was a project called Solagons. Not Soul Gods. People keep messing that up. Solagons. And then there was Soul Cities, and then there was DeadCets, right? And I was like, I'm going to ape some funds into 2 of the 3 of these, right? And the 2 that I ended up picking were Soul Cities and Solagons. And I got so rugged, probably lost like, I don't know, 50 Sol, 60 Sol maybe. Mind you, when Sol was much more expensive. And so, man, really wish somebody would have derugged those, because I had a ton of them and they are worth absolutely nothing now. So, but no, that's cool. I really like the story of people derugging projects has always been something that's really interested in me, because it's cool for me. I love a comeback story. Who doesn't love a comeback story, right? And so seeing you guys, you know, build everything into what you've built it to is really cool. And then I just had the founder of who's derugging Balloonsville on last week, and that was a really interesting conversation, learning about everything they're doing. And they actually just put out their, by the time this is public, it'll be like a week later, but they just put out their new art for their Balloonsville Ascension and everything. And it's just cool to see people doing really, really cool things and people who have really good intentions in this space. And so I just love seeing that, love seeing what you guys are doing. So how did you guys come up with, you know, going from, okay, so DeadCets, because to be honest, I don't even remember hearing about that one. Was that literally like a dead god and Cats on Correct mix?
It was a derivative, and someone made a funny joke about this on a space. Someone said, "Are you guys the most successful derivative derug ever?" I thought that was really funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, exactly right. The 2 NFTs merged together, the Ket base with DeadCets traits. That was the original art, and Obviously, we've taken a very, very different direction from what it looks like now. I don't know if you've seen the original art, but yeah.
No, I don't even. To be honest, like when I was doing research for this project, I literally had no clue that you guys were a derug until I started looking more into it, doing my research, and I was like, oh shit, like DeadCets. I was like, what the hell is that? I was like,
Right.
it must have been a derivative, blah blah blah. But so how did you guys go from we've got this derivative that we now have the authority to creating the idea behind Bad Cats?
Yeah. So originally we realized like our obligation as people derugging the project first and foremost is not to do what we think is the best thing business wise. It's to do what the holders want. Like ultimately, like we are vessels to carry out the actions of the community and what they want. And fortunately, we've evolved into a position where they trust the vision that Lunar and I have enough that they completely have given that to us and say, whatever you guys envision for this space, run with it. We're behind you. So originally, the community wanted to do this kind of idea of trait swapping. And how that originated was at the time we'd released the project, like derug the project, Magic Eden had put out a statement at the time being like, oh, we're not sure about the stance on derivative projects. And obviously, like they've continued to do whatever they're doing going forward. And I have no opinions on that. But at that time, a lot of our holders were concerned, like, is my thing going to be worthless? Is it going to go to zero? And we had kind of two options. One option was, what if we could get into a conversation, get the right legal team and talk to Magic Eden and kind of put ourselves in a position where if we were to trait swap certain aspects of the NFT off, would that cancel the derivative tag? Would that give us enough ownership over it? And ultimately what we concluded with it was that it wasn't enough. So we brought it to the community, like, we can build this going forward. And if it gets IP claimed, if it gets DMCA'd, whatever happens to it, we're just going to build until that moment comes. Or crazy enough, we can try to just redo this whole thing, new art, new everything, new roadmap, new plan. And the only core thing we can really keep to it is everyone was really excited about the idea of swapping traits. Like whatever we do, we're going to make sure that happens and that make sure people get rewarded. So, that kind of initial process of having the community guide where our direction was going to be. And then from there, looking internally, like, okay, we know we have to make a new project. We know we have to do something that's going to supersede this art that people are so attached to. And also break this kind of stigma of people not wanting to work with us or be around us because we're a derivative derug. Those are very negative connotations due to history in the space and how those things have turned out. So just taking it internally and making a whole new project, a new idea, and finding out how to make it in a way where our core holders who've been here for months can engage and be deeply invested into it and not feel like we just abandoned the spirit of what was there, but transformed it into something that could move forward and be even more special than what it already was.
Yeah, and I think you guys took the right approach with that, because I think one of my issues with derivatives is like, to me, it's like, if you think Nike shoes are great, right? But then you come up with literally a shoe that looks exactly the same as a Nike shoe, and maybe it's just slightly different. A, it's never going to be the same quality. And then B, it's like you're taking somebody else's idea. So it's not even original in its own thought, right? And so for me, I'm always like, man, when you create something that's completely unique, that's never been done before, and it's something new and exciting and everything like that. And I think what you guys have done with the trait swapping, that was far before, like, I think when people think about trait swapping, they think about right now the original Whitepaper for Utes, right? A few months back. And it's something that they've kind of since come out and said we're probably not going to end up doing. But you guys were thinking about this months prior to that, right? Which is really cool. I think that's super unique. And I think when the issue once again with derivatives is like, it's hard for that to ever completely catch on, because it's something that's always going to be riding the coattails of something else. Because why have the derivative when you can buy the original? And if the original doesn't go up in, exponential growth, like right now, Cets are somewhere around, I don't even know. I think it's like 30.
Yeah.
Somewhere around there. And it's like, okay, so does that limit the upside of a derivative? Yeah, 100%. How would it not, right? So I think when you go the individual route of we're going to create our own project, obviously it's more difficult to do that. But I think not only did you guys do that, you completely started a new project and you created demand for it. That's a very difficult thing. And so I want to give you guys a lot of kudos to everybody on your team, because that's a difficult thing. I mean, once again, when I heard about Bad Cats, people were asking me, oh, are you minting Bad Cats? I was like, no, I don't have whitelist. I'm I'm not minting any. But there was already a buzz for it, and I didn't know. Once again, I had no clue that it was a derug. So I think that's one of the great things that you guys have done is you guys have been able to create the demand for it, and that goes to show that you guys are really creative people. And so shout outs to you guys for that. Right. So how did you guys come up then with the idea of Bad Cats outside of like the trait swapping and everything like that? Did you decide, okay, we already have like the cat-like figures from DeadCets, so we're going to kind of keep going with that? Where was the thought process behind the art creation?
Right, yeah. So we actually had a quite interesting process to things. Like we knew from the start we wanted things to be cat related just because that's what the holders wanted, and mainly just because the base already being a cat kind of made sense for the transformation and keeping the memes, the culture, the vibes around. And then pretty much we had to go into a situation where it was like, okay, there's a lot of cat projects. We need to create ourselves and brand out in a way that is not only identifiable and unique, but has a strong structure around the message we're trying to push, right? Like everybody's in it for creativity and collaboration and community, but really pushing those values to the absolute maximum they can and culturing the brand and the IP around something that only doubles down and fosters and boosts that environment. So immediately we knew community was our strongest thing. We looked at our strengths and the foundations we had and wanted to push those to the max. And so we started concepting the idea of like, okay, well, we wanted it to be some kind of like streetwear or fashionable to a sense because aesthetics were very valuable in the community. So we wanted to kind of take what the community thought the best aesthetics were and brand around that. So we took the art, mocked up some bases with different artists. And what we did is we took it back to the community, took it to focus groups with Broccoli DAO, which is run by Spoonicus, and kind of just ran through the overall suggestions and reception, like how people who didn't know what the project was thought about it, how original holders thought about it. And eventually we arrived at this base where everybody was super into it. Design-wise, it was amazing. And then taking that base and branding it around it. And what we realized was, shopping ideas and names, we came across the name Bad Cat. And we thought it was too plain. And then Lunar out of nowhere goes, well, what if we, flip the V and say, be very different? And then that kind of expanded into the concept of be very different, create aligning thoughts. And from there, we took the art and we took the slogan and the name, fleshed out the colors, the concepts, all the branding stuff related to it, and just built a lore and a world and an ecosystem that embodied those core concepts.
So let's talk about those core concepts for a moment. So you guys have be very different and then create aligning thoughts, right? So to me, I've got be very different, right? On one hand, but then create aligning thoughts. So those two things, some could say, counteract each other, right? So explain a little bit more of the thought process behind that and kind of what you guys are all about, what that mantra really means to Bad Cats.
Right. So be very different to us and what it means to our community really is just doing things, and they don't have to be completely uniquely different, but never settling for a uniform or typical approach to anything you do. Whether that's the way you represent yourself, whether that's the way you develop things, whether that's the way you go about content creation, is just taking the road less traveled. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to reinvent the wheel every time. It's just always coming at everything you do with that aspect of how do I make this different? How do I take this to the next level? How do I add something here? And really just, not to, dig on any projects, but there's oftentimes, a meta that we all fall into. And one thing we wanted to do is show this concept of by doing things differently, by sticking to your own schedule and what you think is really going to succeed, spreading that thought and getting people to align with that we don't need to cater to a meta. We don't need to cater to a preference. What we need to do is create valuable things, create things meaningfully with systems that are meant to sustain themselves for the distance. And when you do that and create something different, the value comes along with it. When you present it in the right way, the community comes along with it. So, getting everybody on board with the message of be very different and unifying that thought is where we kind of see that message going.
I like that. That's actually one of the more like I told you before we started the podcast that you're super well articulated and man, that went right along with it. I think that's a damn good answer. So I want to talk more about the trait swapping because that's something that's been a subject that people have talked a lot about of, on one hand, you can argue trait swapping is a cool thing because it allows you to completely customize your PFP. And that reminds me a lot of like Fortnite, how you can customize your skins and you can have your guy exactly the way you want him to. But at the same time, there's still, other skins that are more sought after that you can eventually purchase and things like that, right? So On the other hand, though, the counter argument to it is, does it make it where it discourages volume, discourages trades, because you can buy pretty much any bad cat and then make it into a version that you want it to be? And so does that discourage people from buying? Does that discourage people from buying a higher rarity and things like that? So I want kind of your, I guess, your thought process behind the trait swapping. And then do you feel like it discourages, trade volume at the end of the day, which you guys need in order to bring in royalties to pay your team?
Yeah, I would say if it was any other project's current way of trait swapping, you're absolutely right. Like, that's a huge yes. But one thing we took, and we wanted this to be a pre-mint approach, was we were very aware of, like, because trait swapping does exist in these more minor forms, of what the common pitfalls are, right? Like, which is trait supply dilution. You have certain traits losing value as other traits come out, and also the impact it has on the royalty stream. So one thing we did was, we're the first collection to have those traits have cross-collection utility. And one thing that's actually really important about that is, like, people buy above the floor on certain cats because they want access to those traits. Those are the only ways to get them. As time goes on and people swap things on, it's going to make a different value proposition of, if these things were purely aesthetic with a fluid rarity, there isn't much value to buy above floor. But people selling traits that inherently, or combinations of traits on their cat that inherently has utilities with values tied into them, Trip and Ape Tribe's access to stuff, Alpha Pharaoh's access to stuff, or just aesthetic ones that seem to have a lot of value because of the cultural rarity that they have, like the Tyro Robotics helmet. These different factors of allowing external collections, external brands, external utilities to enrich in the way that traits are perceived, not only allows us to create value for the individual bad cats in the long scale, regardless of their rarity, and more of like focusing on the individual value of the traits, and then also creating utilities in the future that are added to traits to prevent that dilution. If everything has a clear value proposition to it, then at the very base level, those traits are worth something, right? And if you can create enough traits that are worth something, even if your floor goes to 40, 50, you have that secondary revenue stream of people who are purchasing utilities via your trait store. And for us, as a model, you will lose some things in royalties on the main collection. That's natural to have happen. But by having our dynamic royalty model, we're allowing ourselves to offer utilities and dual royalty streams to projects. And by doing that, create more utilities, which gets us this strong trait secondary volume. And so I think in the long term, if you think about it properly, if you prevent supply dilution, you add enough value to traits, and you think about how that's going to affect rarity on the long term, and then incentivizing rarity in a way natively that makes those things more valuable again on the floor, you're going to gain more from the royalty gain off traits themselves in secondary.
I mean, that's a damn good answer. So I'm looking forward to seeing how it plays out. I think one of the more interesting things about the NFT space, and what I kind of look for, is I think it's great when people have original ideas. They're trying something new. I also recognize that when somebody tries something new, there's a chance it doesn't work, right? Absolutely. And for me, I really respect the shit out of teams where I'm like, I believe that they're not only going to try new things, but they're also going to pivot if that thing doesn't work, right? And so I believe, just from my conversations that you and I have had, that you guys would pivot if it doesn't work in a way, or if it doesn't play out exactly the way that you see it playing out. But I think that's a great answer, and it's going to be really interesting to see, how the demand works and all of those things. So for people who aren't in Bad Cats yet, when is that trait swapping mechanism going to go live?
Yeah, we're looking at it probably by the end of this month, maybe sooner. The really key thing is, like, we've been developing this for a while, and it's been kind of ready. And taking a software as a service approach, we need to make it white labelable, and that's delayed the time a bit. So one thing we've become quite aware of is, like, we want the trait swapper release to be really strong. We want it to showcase the tech in the right way so that the software as a service sales to support rep are there. So building out the right hype and utility around it, dropping the content that leads up to the trait swapper. I mean, you can't swap without traits. And you need people to be excited about that, not just as like, oh, I've been waiting to do this forever, but building a genuine hype to accessing a wealth of different things. We're exploring concepts of having different things happen to the NFT when you swap something on, and ways of taking it beyond just like, oh, I'm customizing my cat. It's more so you're customizing it, getting access to new resources, finding out new interactions that you didn't know were possible with all these dynamic extensions of the trait swapper. So it should be coming out like at the end of this month, somewhere around that time, maybe earlier if we can push it forward, but we're never going to push anything out that we're not fully confident in the way it can release. And we have a lot of content on the way leading up to that, our run to DGen NFT that I'm super excited to share.
I'll say this too. I think it'd be something, and I've recommended this to other projects, but I think one of the downsides to NFT projects that are a little bit more complex is that if you're somebody coming in from the outside, it's hard to know what I even have access to, right? And so I would highly recommend to you guys, and I'm sure you guys have already thought about this, but doing something that if somebody buys a certain NFT, there's almost like a document that comes along with it of like, hey, because you have like these traits, or hey, if you switch to this trait, like here's how this is going to work. This is how you receive that access to this, to this other subcommittee, or, whatever ends up being that it allows you access to. I think that is something that the ease of information, the projects that really make it so that people can really, really understand what they're doing and understand it quickly, are the projects that are really going to succeed. Because I think a lot of times it's just difficult. We only have so many hours in a day, and it's hard to know, exactly what I get access to with certain things. And I think sometimes you have to deep dive it too much to figure that out. So the more that you guys make that easier for the consumer who comes in, I think the better off it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, you touch on a really good topic. I call it adoption of information. And I think, it's not as simple as how do we make the least clicks for the user to get to a certain task. It's also how do we make the least amount of clicks to get the user the most relevant information. So like two things we try to do is having the website lead directly to the white paper, which has individual tabs with icons and emojis of the traits, the utilities they offer, the quantities, everything. So it's fully transparent. And then also having, automatic verification where if you have a trait and you might not be aware of what it does, when you get in the Discord, certain channels pop up that have a rundown of what you're getting, how to access them, where to go, and the value proposition that they have, whether they're integrated the utilities into our server or externally in. Being aware of how you convey information is really important, especially when you want to approach any project where your goal is to create a complex suite of utilities that add value or concepts that add value. As you flesh that out, it becomes harder and harder to onboard new people because they need to catch up to everything that's going on and what's offered to them. So keeping that concise and always creating in a way where everything is immediately accessible and it's not overwhelming to the user is really, really huge.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that I always recommend is like, I think a white paper is probably one of the more underutilized pieces of information in this space. And yet a white paper is the easiest way to learn about a project. And I think it's something where people do a really good job of putting that out, but then they don't do a good enough job of updating it. And like, that's something where if I'm coming into a project, I want to quickly read their white paper, determine, what aspects of the project I like, what I don't like, and just have I should be able to read your white paper and completely understand your project afterwards.
Absolutely.
And so I highly, highly recommend it to people. Make it easy to find that. And, it's kind of like sometimes I go to people's Twitter for their project and like their Magic Eden link isn't right there. And I'm like, dude, make it easy for me. I want to know where to buy it. And then give me the same thing for the white paper. Make it easy for me to understand the information. Like make it easy for people. And I think that's probably one of the number one reasons why people lose out on volume is because it's too difficult to find where to buy theirs and it's too difficult to understand their project. Those two things. And some could say, oh, well, dude, like, how is it that difficult? Go to Magic Eden, type in the name of the project. But what happens if there's a derivative project that's super similar? What happens if there's another project, like I think there's RadCats too, right? What happens if somebody types in that on accident? Next thing you know, they're buying the wrong project, right? Like make it easy for people when we all have a lot going on. So it's the ease of information is a very important thing. And so I think you guys have a good understanding of that. But that's something I recommend to other projects, man. Make it easy for people to, we all got shit we got going on, okay? We need this shit to be easy. So, but I know you guys have a lot of collaborative partners. So let's talk about that. Kind of what was your pitch to all these different, subcommittees, subDAOs, some of the different projects you guys have involved and things like that. I saw you guys even have a collaboration with the Nipsey Hussle Foundation. So can you guys talk about that in general? Just like what was your pitch to these projects and how did all that play out?
Yeah, I think, and this is probably great advice for anybody who's derugging a project or an upcoming project right now. The biggest hurdle we had when we came up with the collaborative partnership trait concept was how do we get from, the stigma of being a derivative derug that hasn't even minted out yet and then go to like Tire Robotics and be like, hey guys, we want to use your IP. Don't worry, we're going to do something great, So one of those things was just having the approach be genuine and devoting ourselves and putting in the effort to show people that we're super serious. Like our first approach to any project pre-mint, and it still is now, is they'll go, we want to give a pitch, can we get on a call? And, me and Lunar will always make both of ourselves available to be there to kind of do the pitch together. And when they ask, okay, what times are you available? Our response is always pick any time. We're going to wake up, present it, be good for it, whatever time works for you, as soon as you can get us in, whenever it's comfortable. we're going to make that no matter what, because that connection is valuable to us. That opportunity is valuable to us. And just establishing a narrative like that of, once you get into that conversation, letting the founders know, like, hey, you're not joking around. You're going to show them the technicals, the business plan, the financial plan, what you're doing so far, why it matters, and how the tech works on a deep level, as well as how the tech is applied. And almost all of those partner projects, when they heard the way our trait swapper worked on the back end, when they realized the team had like a financial plan that pre-mint, we were already publicly contracting all of the people for the art and the development team and putting that in our white paper, they realized, like, okay, you guys might be a little risky to associate with, but you're doing all the right things, and I want to support it and get behind it. And that's really how it just started to accumulate, between having people on the team who, you know, have talked to founders and built that connection with them, kind of co-sign us, to eventually like legitimizing ourselves enough in a way where we can get projects like Yaku and Atadia and Tire Robotics to kind of co-sign our IP and push us forward. So just putting your head down, grinding it out, being genuine, preparing yourself for everything. You know, don't go into these calls with a loose idea. You get one opportunity. You get 5 minutes to convince these people that your time is valuable and their time is valuable already. So being prepared, being fully prepared, and coming at it and being genuine. That's the way we secured most of these partners. And it's done a huge amount of, it's catapulted us and legitimized us in a way that I couldn't even imagine. It's like, you know, without these people, I don't know if we'd be where we are now. And that's why I'm really, really grateful to every single pre-mint partner we have, and being careful about who we put on that partner list going forward, because we've been blessed enough to be put in this position where some of these really amazing projects co-sign what we're doing and have pushed us into the spotlight a bit with giving us that platform. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree. I actually relate to that with the podcast, right? Because I'm like, everybody that has supported my podcast from the jump, whether it's Frank, whether it's Hex from Soul Gods, all these different project founders, I'm like, man, like I owe it to them to make sure that my podcast is top quality, right? And then I'm like very careful who I bring on, and bringing on the right projects and the right teams and everything like that. So no, I totally get that approach, and I love that. So let's talk about one of the collaborative projects or partners that you guys have. So I found this one really cool, is the Crenshaw jacket that you guys have, and what you guys are doing with Nipsey Hussle's foundation. So can you explain that a little bit further?
Yeah, so you know, how we went about going about that was, we knew we wanted to get a wide range of pre-mint collaborative partners. We didn't want to just go about it in a way wherein we were getting all Web3 projects. We wanted to establish the trait concept as something that worked outside of the sphere of NFTs in general. And, you know, although onboarding people from Web3 into our project is the biggest goal and the biggest way to convert value to your base, leaving yourself with a design and a model that is good for branding in Web2 and going forward into those ventures, we wanted to prove kind of like in a small way that concept could work. And, you know, Lunar, the founder, is a big fan of Nipsey Hussle. You know, for as popular as Nip is, he's very, very underrated, and almost everything that comes out of his mouth is pure wisdom. So we knew from the jump, like, we wanted to do something if we could and collaborate in that way. And fortunately enough, you know, the Neighborhood Nip Foundation is rather quite small. AMC as a charity line is rather quite small. So we were able to reach out and basically ask if it was cool to you know, buy merch and give it back to holders, and use this this trait as a kind of way to support the foundation in any way we can. And they were generally pretty okay with it. They're like, yeah, go ahead. I mean, they're not like Nike, they're not like Adidas. There's not like a huge runway for doing anything crazy with this. And so just taking that position of being able to give back to something that inspires us, which is really important, but also kind of legitimize the concept of, you can take a Web2 brand into Web3, make something that people are excited about, and see the tangible value it has, and then use that as a way to attain a customer base of people who want to buy into what you're doing, buy into your clothing line or whatever. So the whole process was just about making something that was genuine to us, you know, doing something that we could give back to the community with, and also creating something that served as a proof of concept for what we want to do in the future.
That's really cool. I mean, dude, I love the Crenshaw jacket in general, and then I just, as somebody who's a big fan of Nipsey Hussle, I respect everything he's done for South LA and just a lot of the communities in Los Angeles, and then just, I mean, honestly, outside of Los Angeles and the entire country and things like that. So I love everything he's about, and I love that you guys support that too. So that is very, very cool. So big fan of that. But and then another one of the collaborations that you guys have is with the ABC Community Subdial. So could you explain kind of how that works? Because I think that whole collaboration is really unique in itself. So explain that a little bit further.
Yeah, one thing I found really interesting was, you know, immediately after we minted out, I knew the first thing I wanted to do was gather some ETH attention. I was very, very confident in our position on how we would slowly acquire an audience and a market audience on Solana. So I wanted to do something that not only was kind of refreshing, but also legitimizing a project I really, really am fond of, honestly, just to put it plainly, a project that I really want to get behind the concept and idea. And if I wasn't dedicating 24 hours to BVDCat, I would most certainly be helping out in some way over there. Great people. But, just reaching out to Paper Hands, who kind of works on the ABC project, and collaborating with a founder of mine, Bongus, who we've worked on a lot of different things together. He was working on a collaboration with DogDAO, and I was like, "Wait, you can do that? You can officially collaborate with Subdials?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I saw that, and I knew immediately, like, I wanted to not only provide an avenue to legitimize ABC as a project, like their IP, like how it can be used and how awesome it can be, but also kind of solve a core issue for ABC, which was funding for their treasury and their subDAOs. And then just going about that process of talking to every subDAO from the ground up, understanding how ABC worked as a community, who its leaders were, who had the authority, CC0, and going about the process in a genuine way. So, just talking to every single core lead of every subDAO, messaging them personally, getting in calls and just being like, here's the concept, here's how we do things, here's how it can create revenue for your subDAO, and here's how it can be valuable, and just going through all the communities with that proposition. Conversations I've had with Paper Hands, who's one of the core guys behind he's the guy who runs the main Twitter account, was just about like the issues that ABC has in terms of like, it's a really unique project in the way it's ran. And so it has a lot of unique problems that don't really have a clear solution that you can look at. And so one of those solutions was like, how do these subDAOs fund themselves in their treasuries to do different things and expand themselves? And I wanted to kind of create something, obviously one of the biggest models is they partner with a project, they drop like an ABC version of whatever, half of it goes to them, half of them goes to the community. And a lot of those haven't retained their value over time. I realized that BVDCat, with the longevity it has, not being like a derivative or a small project, I could use that platform that we have to legitimize an ABC collaboration wherein their IP is not just strong, presentation wise, it's literally valuable. And so one of the things we wanted to do with that is just not only create these ABC partnership traits to show how big the IP is, give them a utility built by us out of our pocket so that these things can be valuable and these subDAOs can get funds from having these in their treasury to run the process out over time. So it was just a very organic process of talking to all the community members, doing it in a genuine way where we had everyone in the community support. Everything was ran through a vote through all like 12, 13 subDAOs. Even talking with HGE and talking with Paper Hands about the right way to go about things, just taking that whole approach and fleshing it out into a concept that's not only cool, but valuable and betters the ecosystem.
So let's explain that a little bit further. So somebody who eventually trade swaps for this ABC characteristic, right? How does all of that work, and like what is the utility behind that?
Yeah, so the utility we have that we've designed for the ABC trait is a cashback mechanism. And it's very interesting in how it works is we wanted to take the concept of lowering royalties and gamify them in a way that made sense. So we're designing all of the ABC traits that when they're swapped onto a BVDCat, the seller fee on the cat is rolled between a random percentage. We saw the model that DeadCets had with kind of like dust refunds, and we wanted to do a concept that incentivized people to pay their royalties in any way possible. And a part of creating that value was making this ABC trait have two propositions, right? One, lowering the royalties incentivizes people to sell it more on a traditional marketplace and wherein you're not circumventing that. And then two is adding a value proposition inherently that circumvents the royalty. So people who are buying into a BVDCat, right, with an ABC trait, there's inherently a value above floor because when that person wants to liquidate their position, they already have that kind of that trait on it that gives them that royalty discount. So not only is it reducing the royalties that the seller loses, it allows the seller to sell it at a higher price that offsets the royalties because there's that value proposition in it. And by baking these things in both ways, we can create methods to incentivize royalties going forward.
I mean, dude, that's so well thought out. Like I love that. Like You were asking me before we started this podcast, my feelings towards doing this podcast and stuff like that. And I said to you, it's like, the one downside is when you feel like an idea has been repeated by other people. Right. And so when I hear something that's like new and fresh and I've never heard that before, and it's truly like next level thinking, I fucking love that shit. And like, that is exactly what you just said. So I love that. I think that's really, really cool. I'm super excited to see how that plays out. And I might have to get that trait. So I'm sold. I want that trait now. So, okay, so next up, I want to talk about the social staking. So obviously, you guys have with the trait swapping and everything, everyone's going to need your token in order to do that, right? And so you guys have traditional. Let me make sure I have this right. You guys have traditional staking where somebody just goes on the website, stakes it, and then you guys have on top of that additionally social staking. Am I right on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so can you explain kind of what the thought process is behind the staking and why have the social staking alongside the typical staking?
Right. So we originally knew we wanted to do a token, have it interact and create value with it over time. The first thing we wanted to do was leave ourselves open to kind of do different creative concepts that involved ownership of the NFT and wallet. So our original staking is a non-custodial traditional staking with no locks. It stays in your wallet. You can lock it in, withdraw it at any time, claim your rep at whatever point you'd like. And then we wanted to add another layer to reward people who wanted to take it further, and kind of having like these two streams between, the ultimate value proposition is in rep and how that interacts with your bad cat going forward, but also having this second layer where people can get rewarded for going above and beyond. And that's really the thing about a community is it's not just about like the volume and what you're building, it's about the optics that's outside of you. And leveraging your own community is like your biggest incentive ever. You have people who have financial bags in your project, and you're allowing an avenue for them to increase the value behind those bags or increase the value of how they interact with the system by monetizing their engagement. And so that's what social staking really is. It's another layer for people who want to represent the project on a deeper level, but it also provides us a way to incentivize users to basically be marketing for Bad Cat and be happy about it because we're giving them something of value. And I think what's really cool is like our first airdrop, the Scouters for social stakers, was a big proof of concept to show people the tech works and that it can be a valuable concept. And just having it, having that airdrop be successful and seeing some of the sales be 20 SOL, 23 SOL, it's made us realize that social staking is something going forward can be more valuable than just this gimmick to get people to engage. Our tech, at least, is another way for you to drop SPL tokens to wallets, drop seasonal tokens, traits, track all kinds of manual data sets and engagement sets, and utilize that in a way to kind of build the project going forward and understand what people really want to see and what's really going to move the needle.
I think that's really interesting. Staking to me is something that I think if done right can have a lot of benefits, but if done wrong can also hurt. I think there's, I've heard about other projects where the only way to stake is if you have that project as your PFP, right? And I'm not a fan of that concept because to me, for a lot of people, your NFT, your PFP becomes your social identity in crypto Twitter, right?
Absolutely.
And so for me, there's pretty much nothing that can get me to change my PFP. But that would discourage me from buying a PFP if I felt like the only way I can stake that NFT is if I have it as my PFP, right? But what you guys are doing is a unique twist of it allows you still can stake like normal, but then you also can receive an added bonus if you're going next level in your terms of supporting Bad Cats, right?
Right.
I think that's a really cool concept. I think Outcast Academy, what they're doing is a cool concept. They have their drama token that you can stake their NFTs and receive drama token, but you can also, if you're doing something on Twitter, if you're being a little spicy and whatnot, they'll send you drama token just for keeping Twitter interesting, right?
Exactly.
So I think there's the ways of getting the SPL token. The more I guess like interesting we get with that, the more creative we get with that, the better off we are. And so I think what you guys are doing is really cool. But I like that you guys still have the traditional staking because I think that has a big benefit with that. So. Okay, so then let's talk about you guys have Bad Cat. Well, how do you pronounce that? So BVD Labs? Are we calling that one BD? Or are we calling that Bad Labs?
We're calling it Bad Labs.
Okay, Bad Labs.
With the bad everything.
Okay, bad everything. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about Bad Labs. What is Bad Labs, and what is your relationship with crypto coders?
Yeah, so this is an awesome story because Bad Labs wasn't original. Like when we set out to do this, Bad Labs wasn't a thing. We along the development process, we had like developers flake on us through the times where we were derugging it. Eventually, we worked through developer to developer and got to crypto coders, pitched them our concept, paid an upfront, and we began working on the project together. And over time, like of a month, 2 months, we would just constantly be talking about our visions for the project, their visions as a development team. And it got to a point where we realized like we were both super passionate about doing cool, unique stuff. And they really liked like what energy we were bringing to the table. They saw that out of all the teams they've worked with, and they've worked with like 100 plus, they were like, what you guys are doing, there's so much passion and genuineness behind it. Like the fact that you're not just here for the meetings, you're here spamming me while I'm sleeping about different tech options and things we can do. Eventually it just blossomed into an idea of like, if we have such a close relationship, why don't we just take this in a way that benefits both of us even further? And so we created Bad Labs as kind of this way to not only sustain the development side of BadCat at a reasonable price, but also allow our developers an avenue to create whatever they want. I remember the first day I kind of conceived the idea for Bad Labs was when Jilly, the lead dev of Crypto Coders, told me, any tech you want, we're not limited to making. We work on 3 chains. We have an extensive team. Our connections are really deep. We go to every hackathon. Our limit is resources, not talent. And right off the bat, I knew whatever I do, I need to create a system wherein I can have these guys working with me forever because they have the right mentality and the right attitude and the right skill set to bring any vision we want to life. And so what quickly became was, talking to different investors and projects, and shout out to Hewitt Enigma, spitting a lot of game for us on how to take the project forward, was looking at that and figuring out that relationship can be created in an in-house circle type of development team. So, I worked out some concepts for software as a service, felt out like the demand for the trait swapper that we were making, and kind of talked to the team about, is this white labelable? And when that came through, we decided that, okay, if we're selling a software as a service, if we're going to sell it together, we should sell it under a joint partnership, and we should push that forward in a way that makes sense. So what it blossomed into was the concept of Bad Labs, which is a, collaboration between us and Crypto Coders where they develop tech for us, relatively free of charge for the main project. And BadCat serves as a proof of concept to sell the software behind. So we facilitate bringing it to the market, showing what it's capable of, being the runway project for the metrics and analytics that get used for the marketing sheets, and then also having a portion of that revenue come back to supporting our ecosystem via rep. So they create software and technology for us that we think is viable and marketable. We show that it works and that it's profitable. We offer that service to other products who want to have similar growth. And 80% of that funds back their development team, which goes into developing new tech for us because that's all they want to do. We end up not paying much for the tech in the long term, which allows us to build out a bunch of stuff on the fly, like the social staking, which we made in about 8 days. And 20% of that revenue goes back to supporting rep. So, us as a project are incentivized to not only get this tech from them, but to keep pushing it forward because it provides us liquidity to make different moves to expand the rep system, which is almost in itself a direct reinvestment to our developers since that's what they're doing. And having this co-harmonious relationship where we're just building out new tech that's good enough to sell, we don't have to pay our developers that much because they're getting paid through the software as a service deals with the majority of the majority share. And we're happy to push the creative side of things and find out which tech ideas are worth bringing to the market and showing how they can be valuable. So Bad Labs is kind of that love child of developing a bunch of cool shit for BadCat and then us taking that and showing how it's valuable so that we can keep funding their development.
Once again, extremely well thought out. I'm really looking forward to that. I feel like a lot of times when I hear about people doing something labs, right? I'm like,
right.
There is that concept of, are we going to have too many of these, right? And so I think anytime anybody's willing to do something different and then also to truly innovate, like that's when we're going to see real advancement. Because I think sometimes it's like we're going to have certain things that become anytime
right.
You're building something right now, that will eventually become the norm, right? And
Absolutely.
So it's the people who can really build from there that will be, who will have their, Bad Labs or whatever their equivalent is, have that still be relevant a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, if you're truly continually innovating. And that's what I like to see. And it seems like you guys are doing that. So, so next up from there, you guys have Bad Market. So what is Bad Market?
Yeah. So Bad Market is kind of like our way to distribute traits outside of a random variable. We're expanding it to do a bunch of different things, but what it's going to be able to do on releases, people are going to be able to spend the rep to get different things via auctions. Those things can be traits from candy machines, packages of traits, different exclusive stuff that's like recolors of traits that are in limited supply with lower quantity, utility partner traits, and then also having this like storefront distribution where there's a first come first serve, where we can, you know, have that be an avenue to charge either rep or soul and onboard different brands, creators, and influencers, one of one artists especially, which is what our focus is in the next few days with this drop of Bad Market. And by the time this comes out, I think it'll already be out. A lot of this stuff we're talking about will already be out for the people who are watching this. So, but what we're basically trying to do, and what we're going to do, by the time you've seen this, is have this platform for one of one artists to be able to sell their content, have people who know it's just an aesthetic value, which is what the spirit of one of ones are, and be able to purchase rep to get something that not only provides exposure to an undervalued community, but also makes like kind of iconic pieces with a different art style be able to be integrated into our project. So Bad Market is kind of going to be just this one-stop shop for us to find different ways to easily distribute different parts of our content in ways that make sense, so that the people who want to onboard with us, whether that be Web2 brands, IPs, influencers, or one of one artists, have a different mechanism of how they want to release and monetize their stuff.
That's really cool. That's really cool. So we had a conversation earlier before we started this podcast about immutable and mutable NFTs. And so can you explain a little bit more of your thought process behind what you guys are doing with mutable NFTs?
Yeah, so the mutability of the NFTs we have is kind of like the heart of everything we're doing, right? Like it allows you to dynamically trait swap things, it allows you to edit the metadata, it allows you to do all these cool interactions. And we're aware that like there's this big divide between people who enjoy the mutable side of NFTs and people who value the true ownership of immutable NFTs. So one of the things we wanted to do going forward is kind of like this concept, and we're calling it for this process right now, immortalization. But this concept of allowing people to change their mutable NFTs into immutable NFTs and then gaining a suite of benefits alongside with it.
Okay, so can you explain how that's going to work out in like actuality? Like give an example of how that could play out.
Right. So say somebody wants to make a bad cat and they want it to be exclusive, right? They want to be the only one who has it. Right now, like anybody can copy anybody's trait design. And what's really interesting is that makes it for us difficult to push IP rights going forward where anybody can natively infringe on stuff. And obviously the token is individually different, but we're getting into a gray area of territory where natively in most collections, all the NFTs are identifiably different and are unique. So what we wanted to do was kind of figure out a solution twofold to not only allowing people to get the IP rights, but create an avenue for people who value true ownership of their stuff. And having the IP rights to your stuff is true ownership. So not just giving that to people, but actually having a technological way to ensure that these people have the rights to their stuff and the ownership of their stuff. So one thing we wanted to do and wanted to commit to was creating a mechanism wherein people could pay an amount of rep token to make their mutable bad cat immutable, locking in the traits, preventing anybody in the trait swapper from being able to create that combination going forward. And upon creating that immortalization process, you get this immutable NFT that may or may not gain more rep, to be decided, but will also give you the full IP rights and the exclusivity to take your bad cat and do whatever you want with it in the public eye.
That's really cool. So that means that if they make it immutable, right, there's no way to ever go back to that being a mutable NFT. Right. There we go. That's a fun game. I'm excited to see how that plays out. So another question from the community. We had people submit some questions on Twitter, and one of the questions was about the DeadCets, and they were wondering basically, is there going to be any additional utility to people who have held since essentially the original rug?
Yeah. So the people who originally held DeadCets, just to get a quick TLDR to catch some people up who might be unaware of how the DeadCets process worked, was every DeadCets holder when Bad Cat came out got a free mint if they were willing to burn the NFT. People who burned above the floor in rarity or had certain exclusive traits were collected via our custom burn site to have a list of information of who burned what from what wallet, so we could retroactively drop them the most iconic traits from the collection. You know, this would be like the mullet trait, the pink acid skin trait. So one thing we wanted to do was, we knew we had to burn the DeadCets and separate ourselves legally from that entity. Just to have no attachment of any funds deriving from an IP other than ours could be considered, IP copyright. And so while we won't be doing anything going forward relating to DeadCets, monetizing DeadCets, rewarding DeadCets at all, just because we need to separate from that entity entirely to protect our future, we will be doing a retroactive airdrop, and it should be out by the time this comes out, wherein people can get a whole different set of traits that are super awesome. And they are some of the most iconic traits. There are some that that in their slot, you're not going to be able to get another one for a long time in the pipeline. So original holders who get that, I think, are going to see a lot of value for those traits, not only the cultural significance they have, but how much we've reworked the aesthetics over and over, you know, just doing it once, doing it a second time, being like, okay, now we're 5-6 times deep. Is this the right way to properly reward the people who have been here for 3-4 months? And arriving on that answer of yes is where we're at.
I like that a lot. I really like that. Yeah, and I think it's something, too, that I think people have to keep in mind, and this is something we talked about before we started the podcast, that when it comes to NFT project founders, I always like them, in my mind, to bring value to people who just bought today.
Right.
Because if you're one of the OGs, you know, you guys have been taken care of, and that's the thing you have to remind yourself is that if you've been there since the jump, you're always going to receive the most amount of benefit. But the people who are coming in right now for any project, this doesn't go for just BVDCats, this goes for literally any project. Right. If you're buying right now, you've essentially, if anything, lost, right? It lost value because there's a chance that you bought, then it dipped down a little bit, you know, whatever, right? So I want that project founder to be thinking about how can I bring value to that person? Because inherently, if they bring value to that person, then they're also bringing value to somebody who was an OG holder or something along those lines, right? So I think sometimes we think about the when it comes to like the diamond hands, right? That, you know, sometimes people feel like, well, I should be, you know, given an extra benefit because I am a diamond hands holder, yada, yada, yada. What they don't understand is that by being a diamond hands holder, what you're doing is you're creating a supply shock by there being a limited amount of that project's NFTs available on the marketplace. As a result of that, the floor price goes up and things like that. And so by you are benefiting yourself really by helping to benefit the project overall by not listing. And so as a result of that, your community takes this, you know, ironclad approach of you know, we're not selling. And that's, you know, using DeadCets as an example, that was something that when Utes came out, everybody was asking the question, is DeadCets going to go down in value? Because now somebody has, you know, essentially redeemed their tube, right? And is that going to hurt the price of DeadCets? Well, what we've seen is we saw a slight drop and it's rallied right back, right? And it's because people have kind of built this community out as like DeadCets is the most like diamond-handed, diamond-fisted group of people, even though there are people who have come into the community who weren't here since mint day, but it's the like overall feeling of the community that we've built up, right? And so it's the same thing with like the OG mentors of DeadCets is that those people who, you know, a year from now will be able to say, hey, I've been in this project for a year. I've been here since the original project Rugged, right? Like there's something about that that's a special thing because you're helping develop the community. As a result of that, you are a big part of whether that community is going to be around a year from now, right? There's only so much a founding team can do to develop the community. You can give, like, you've given great answers on this podcast, and I have no doubt like that I believe in you and your team. At the same time, it's going to then take the community to say, okay, hey, we're hearing what they're saying and we're going to go spread that message, right? We're going to go create threads from this podcast. We're going to go do those sort of things. When you do that as an OG holder, you know the whole history of that project and you're able to articulate that to other people who are coming in from the outside. That is one of the biggest benefits as an OG person is you know the history. So right. I think that's what people have to do is they have to change their thought when it comes to what the benefits are of being like a diamond-handed OG holder. You are the community. You've developed it. You are a big part of that aspect of something, and that's something you should be proud of. And as a result of that, if the founding team is always bringing new value to somebody who just bought in today, then they're inherently bringing value to you. Yeah, and so exactly. I think people just have to think about it, a little bit different. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents.
Just to touch on it, like one thing I always try to stress to our oldest holders is, and I love that you mentioned the history, like understanding the history and portraying that. One thing we try to do all the time is remind people and remind our holders, like we are building a platform for you to push the message and succeed. Like ultimately, what we create, there's a finite scope of reach we can really get out to. It's going to be up to the holders. It's going to be up to the community. It's going to be up to them to be able to take the presentation, the utilities, the project that we've made and push the message forward. And having your utilities in a way correlate to helping the community get in that habit of pushing things forward. You know, since day one, we've been enculturing our Subdial communities, just to try to make sure that holders are empowered. One thing I've seen in a lot of successful projects is, and you know, we talked about it a bit before this about DeadCets, is how their holders, a lot of them are ingrained in some of the best projects or just, you know, are total builders and developers in the space. That's one thing I was really keen on and understood was that you can empower your holders, and as a byproduct, you expand that reach much, much deeper by having them not only understand the history, but empowering and culturing the history of Solana with your projects. Different DeadCets holders are now history in Solana. And when that's looked back on about where those founders got their starter, or, who kind of like put them on that path, it all leads back to that one person. So it's like, making sure the holders understand the history, understand the message, know how to spread the message. And just to kind of like, that topic of old holders, I say it to them a lot. Holding rep is going to be your benefit in the long term. The fact that emits, that's your long-term hedge. The fact that you've staked it longer than others, that's going to be our biggest way of rewarding you. Everything we make going forward has like 3 concepts. Is it sustainable and sellable as a software as a service? Does it value rep in the long term? And is it fun and interactive for anyone who would buy in after this announcement? Does this make someone want to buy, get into the ecosystem, and then immediately think, wow, value is added to me, I'm into this? And by doing that, right, like you mentioned, it's going to create systems wherein the old holders are rewarded the most and onboarded users are having a great time.
Man, I wish we did this podcast before you guys minted, but I need to give myself a bag because I'm loving what you're saying here. So I want to talk more about a big part of your white paper was the phygital rewards. And so I think a lot of people, they don't necessarily understand what phygital is. So can you explain that first and then also explain kind of what your thought process is with phygital rewards?
Yeah, so the phygital reward structure, and I want to emphasize the rewards aspect of it, is phygital is basically the concept of merging the physical and digital. And why we want to specify this as phygital rewards is we want to create the project and the product in a way wherein anytime we do something IRL, that can correlate directly back to Web3, right? We're merging these experiences. So anytime you would interact with anything we do in the Web2 space, there should be some direct correlation to Web3 and vice versa. And one of the ways actually we like to do that going forward, and some of the proof of concepts people are going to see, is not only creating merch, but having merch wherein you have a copy of that merch that you can wear on your bad cat. You scan a QR code or something, you get that trait and you're able to swap it on your bad cat and properly represent yourself in Web 2 and Web 3. And also having it wherein, you go to events, you have experiences, anything you interact with in Web 2 directly correlates to some value or addition or commemorability to Web 3. And DGen NFT, which is coming up. I don't know if this will be out before or after then.
I think it's going to come out right after we get back.
Right after? Yeah. Okay. So holders by that point, and some people who went, should have received and will receive a IRL commemorative trait, something they can bring back to their bad cat, and then people can immediately see and be like, oh, that person went to DGen NFT, and they can see other people who went there and kind of immediately identify, the experiences they've had with others. And then also adding like this cool utility we've done with Valhalla Labs, wherein, you get access to every single Valhalla Labs event going forward if you have that commemorative trait, and being able to kind of like display that as a way of saying like, hey, I like to have a good time. I'm going to be here going forward. And I know who my peers who've bought this kind of object are going to be doing and are going to be into. They're going to be at all those IRL events. So not only creating things where you're obtaining stuff IRL for being in Web3, bridging the way you connect users in Web 2 and Web 3, making the Web 3 group of people we have friends and holders and connected their experiences in Web 2 using those mechanisms.
Well, that's really cool. I like that thought process. So, one thing that I have no doubt that you guys will be able to crush, because you guys appreciate quality, is merch. So I was surprised that nobody in your community on that Twitter thread earlier today asked about it, but I'm just genuinely wondering, is there going to be merch coming soon with you guys?
I don't know about the frame of coming soon, but basically we have a very unique opportunity wherein if you're a project right now and you want to launch merch, you have to deal with logistics, international logistics, shipping logistics, distribution, price, return to profit. You got all these different variables. And even just starting it up before it becomes profitable is a huge capital investment, time investment, staffing investment. We have a unique avenue wherein we can take the reach we have, being like the second biggest Twitter reach across ETH and Solana, go to these different merch projects, smaller projects which do really cool merch or have that entire focus, and be like, hey, do you want to release your merch via us or do custom versions of our content as merch pieces with you, kind of like, white labeling the merch from these people that we know are quality, and then having them integrate their products into our model, whether it's creating a trait that directly gives you that, that piece of apparel, or one that if you stake it for 30 days, it gives you that piece of apparel, or even just being entered in a raffle to earn that piece of apparel. We're going to be able to have the avenue to partner with like 10 to 15 plus different projects that offer their merch, which also gets exposure to them, but also offer our own versions of our branded merch using their networks to distribute that to holders. So we're definitely looking into it, and we want to take a unique spin on it, something that makes sense profitability and visibility wise as a brand, but is also, different in the way we approach it.
I'm interested to see what that is because I already know that you've got some ideas in your head, and so I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out. I've got a few more questions about the trait swapping that I forgot to ask earlier, and so I'll ask them both now, and then you can just kind of address them at the same time. But one is, are all the traits on the marketplace going to have a fixed supply? And if not, why not? And then will there be new fur traits? And then how do you anticipate that will affect the value of the current fur traits?
Right. So as far as traits that we release, we're pretty transparent about putting the quantities of how many are going to be out. Most of them will be released fixed. That might not necessarily mean all of the fixed supply is released immediately. When it comes to a content drop, typically we're thinking about two to three things. Is one, how do we distribute these traits in a way where the initial release of them doesn't dilute the market? Basically, how can we drip this content out to users to keep this trait interesting and, obtainably unique? And then the second thing is like going forward in a way where, in regards to furs and skins like that, we're not planning to release a lot of them, but when we do, they're going to be things that are highly, highly impactful, because when we make a different fur skin, we have to make hundreds of variations of each trait to accommodate our custom color linked logic. So while we're not super looking into furs, I think people will start to realize that every fur trait coming out and the ones that exist originally are all inherently valuable because they all come with their own unique variation of each trait. You're not just getting a wizard hat, you're getting a wizard hat that has customized details to every fur skin in the collection. It looks different on a diamond fur than it does on a fur that might come out later or a fur that exists now. And so every fur has this own level of small detail added to the traits that are on top of it, that once people really get to the trait swapper, they're going to realize, like, you see it now in our collection in small ways with the mustaches. It's the same trait and the same trait listing, but if it's on the ghost skin, it's invisible. If it's on the diamond skin, it's blue. If it's on a regular skin, it's brown. Having this kind of value where the base furs are attached to multiple variations of hundreds of traits along the collection, it adds value to the furs and the fur traits themselves and the bad cats themselves going forward.
There we go. So, all right. So I think right here is actually a great opportunity to wrap up. But before we do that, I want to give you a second to address your community and then to anybody who's thinking about buying today. So just kind of let people know, I guess, what they can look forward to with the future of Bad Cats. And then just in general, why they should be bullish about Bad Cats. If there's any alpha you want to drop, anything that you want to do to get people excited, this is your opportunity to talk to your community.
Yeah, I just want to say, I'm super grateful for the opportunity we've gotten. When I started this project back in April, I worked on it because it was something I was passionate about. Like a guy approached me, Lunar. He had this vision, and he would be up to like 2 a.m. Just talking about all the possibilities and where this could go. And he was a guy who was thinking about how big this could be when it was nothing. And for me, I'm a very pragmatic person. I didn't see that at all, but seeing how inspired he was made me want to push forward and work and create something to fulfill his vision, essentially, and see where it goes. And in that process, I didn't realize that I would be basically shaping the future of what I want to do forever, which is be in this space, create things, have a community that values the content, that are grateful for the content we're making, and just being able to provide not only experiences, but value that directly benefits people's lives. So I just want to say to all the holders, anybody who will buy a bad cat, anybody who bought a bad cat now, who's bought a dead cat back in the day, who might be watching this a year from now and buys a bad cat, that I'm super grateful for every opportunity to just work and put our head down and grind this out. And if there's any reason to buy a bad cat now, it's not for any of the utilities. It's not for the rep token. It's for the fact that every person on this core team is not going to stop building and creating things until we create enough value for people, every person in our community, to be satisfied. Since we started this project on day one, it wasn't about money. It wasn't about attention. It wasn't about fame. It was about bringing holders who were passionate enough to put themselves behind something, even if they might get, shunned for having a derivative or doing this, and giving them a voice and an avenue to say, like, you're valuable as a person, you're valuable in this community. And we want to make sure that you're taken care of, that you have something that is valuable from what you've invested in and put your heart and your emotion into, and make that valuable. And that's what we're going to do as a team. To anyone thinking of buying, invest in people who don't necessarily like have it all planned out, but have an ambition to make sure that whatever plan going forward, adaptability wise, is going to succeed, that you're going to try to make yourself succeed at all cost, make your holders succeed at all cost. The utility we're building now is awesome, and I have a lot of great stuff I could share and could say, but in 3 months from now, we're going to be doing even bigger and more amazing things. Trait swapper, everyone goes crazy about it. And the greatest alpha I can give is that we look at trait swappers like 10% of what BadCat is. Like, it's something that we're thinking scalability wise about how to sustain and keep going forward in a way that, like, it's exciting, but doesn't run itself as the only thing we're about. And 3 months from now, 4 months from now, looking back at this, people are going to be like, wow, that makes so much sense, because everything right now is about the trait swapping. But we're keen on making BadCat something beyond that, like just a project in itself that does things, that adapts, that creates new utilities, and social staking is one. So just be excited in the fact that we're a project you can get behind and is always going to do something to push something forward. You're never going to have a boring day with us. We might drop some crazy utility on you that we never announced. And we don't stick to our roadmap. We like to fulfill our roadmap and then create 20 different things along the way to keep it fun. So to anyone looking to buy, you know, we're building for the future, and we're building things that are meant to scale the distance, like to support the entire ecosystem.
Well, damn, I'm bullish. I'm fired up to go buy one right after this podcast, because I got like a week before this releases, so I will be buying a few. But with that said, can you tell everybody, drop your socials? Where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find us at BadCat, BVDCAT_. Check our website at bvdcat.io. You can find me on Twitter at NFTHellBoy. I just want to say, you know, shout out to the holders, shout out to Lunar Rivers, Less Vision NFT, Dozy Lemon, Mississippi Rich. Those guys have been working just as hard as I am. And, you know, me and Lunar go out here and say a lot of things and on our face of the project, but everybody puts in the work behind the doors. Everybody made this happen. Bluey, our new community managers, everybody who's been a part of it, you know, that couldn't be here, but, you know, have made all of this conversation possible, all of this tech possible, everything possible. I just want to thank them and take that time to put them in the spotlight. And if anyone wants to find me, you know, at NFTHellBoy or HellBoyJ on 0080 on Discord, my DMs are always open. Happy to answer any project, individual, founder, business, anything.
There we go. There we go. Yeah, send me a list of all your team. I'll throw them in the description of this video. So if anybody wants to give them a shout out, they can do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, man, I thoroughly enjoyed this. So I'm looking forward to the future of BadCats. I'm looking to looking forward to seeing everything that you guys innovate with. And you're full of great ideas, and I'm really excited to see how these play out, and then to see how you kind of pivot as you know time goes on and things like that. So yeah, man, appreciate you making the time to come out here, and yeah, very, very looking forward to the to the future of BadCats.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's great to be out here.
And no problem. We'll definitely have to have you back, man. I think everyone's going to be real excited after hearing this episode, and I'm already looking forward to the next time you come out here, because you've got a great approach of how you approach all of this stuff, and I'm excited to meet you guys. Your whole team's going to be in Vegas next week?
Yeah, our whole team's going to be there.
Man, I'm excited to meet all of them. So looking forward to that. And but yeah, once again, thank you for coming on. You. And for everybody else, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys soon. See you guys.
Peace.
All right, so we ended the podcast, and then you were like, oh, shit, I have an audio clip from Lunar, right, that you wanted to play?
Yeah.
So you started to play this, and I started laughing. I was like, we got to go right back to recording. So, all right, so this is from Lunar. So drop this. Let's hear it.
Listen, shout out Hellboy for making that happen. Shout out Marc. Let's get a great episode in today, y'all. We fucking got this. BadCat, baby. It's the bad way. Y'all in LA. I'm with Dozy, I'm with Richie, I'm with Hellboy J. It's a movement, it's a lifestyle every fucking day. We popping out, we making noise, don't know my fucking name. You cannot stop the baddest cats all up on this blockchain. Now it's a rap, don't follow tracks, we go against the grain. B, V, D, C, N, T, B, D, K. Let's get it.
That was legendary. I did not hear that at all before this. That was legendary.
That's amazing. That's amazing. He's making Nip proud, you know?
Yeah.
That was awesome. I'm looking forward to meeting Lunar, because that energy right there was infectious. So
yeah, that's gonna be a crazy interview.
Oh man, that'll be fun. That'll be fun. But yeah, man. Well, hey, once again, appreciate that. Appreciate that from Lunar. I'm looking forward to, by the time this podcast comes out, I think I'm gonna put it out Friday. We the day we get back from DJ NFT. So I'll have met Lunar at that point, but looking forward to meeting him, and looking forward to once again the future of BadCats. And once again, thank you everybody for listening, and let's get it. Bright future ahead. So there we go. See you guys.